And we're back. Welcome to stage 2. If you haven't been on stage 1 a few minutes ago, then you missed an awesome keynote and you missed my face. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Mark Fontijn and I'll be hosting the next few hours actually on this stage. So make sure you stick around because here's the action. Here are going to be the awesome presentations and talks. Right, let's not lose too many time because we have some interesting presentations and guests lined up for you. And we're going to, oh, I'm hearing myself. Now I need to silence the, not music, the voice over here. Anyway, let's start. And I'm going to introduce the first speaker for you here on stage 2. He's the director of product design at Quiv in Finland. I asked him, what is taking a stand? What does that mean for you? And he said, staying true to whatever principles you are committed to protect despite their popularity. After the next 20 minutes, you'll know what it means to be a data-savvy service designer. And his first memory was about 8 years ago, and you're going to learn more about that. He's also, and this is very, very important for the upcoming 20 minutes, a principal sonologist. Lassi, welcome to the stage, and I hope that I introduced you in a proper manner. The stage is all yours, and have fun.
Thank you, Mark. That was spot on. Let me try to get myself also visible with the slides, and then we can kind of get going with the actual content. Yes, so Mark gave a pretty good introduction to who I am. I'm Lassi, him coming from Finland, and I work on a company called Quiv. And I also claim myself to be some sort of authority in terms of Finnish sauna design. But here I'm talking about terms about things about data and design for the next about 20 minutes. First few words where I'm coming from. So I run design competence in a company called Quiv, which is a company based in Helsinki and Stockholm, about 100 people. We help our customers in matters of design, insight, and technology. And today, well, I have to say that planning this talk started something like 2 years ago, and things were a little bit different back then. And today, I then decided that for this talk, I will kind of revise a little my thinking, and instead of being too much data-driven, I'll talk about what is it to be a data-savvy service designer. So we'll start about this data topic from the very beginning. It's not that far in the past, but I think I want to make one question to the audience at this point. You should, in Brella, find this poll, which might be on your right side of the screen if you're using the desktop version. There should be a poll which allows you to answer the question, have you heard about big data? Now I have to say that I'm kind of running blind here, and I'm trying to get some assistance from Mark in order to figure out if people are discovering this poll or not, because I can't really see it.
I will be monitoring this for you, Lassi, and as soon as we have some input, I will get back to you.
Yeah, let's do that, Mark. So don't fear to interrupt me, but I'll move forward because my assumption here is pretty strong in the sense that I'd say that past 10 years, the past decade, 2010, 2020, we were living this kind of a decade of big data. Before 2010, actually before 2011, very few people had heard about big data. And the big data actually made the kind of first headlines just around 2010. And then it grew to be quite major, I'd say hype at first, but then again, there seems to be quite a lot of actual content with this data hype. So in some figures, for instance here, it's been claimed that the amount of data going around in the world grew within 10 years almost 32 times. The volume of data that was copied, created, and transferred. You can basically understand this if you look at your smartphone from 2010 and your phone from 2 years ago. The capacity has been increasing, but of course, a lot of things have been happening in the cloud.
Lassi, so here's the Netherlands calling. Okay, we have some preliminary results of the poll. Can you do a guess how many people have heard about big data?
Well, I would guess at least 95%.
Oh, no, you're not very good at guessing. It's 97%. So
I always got this wrong. Thanks, Mark. That was great insight. So we actually got our kind of first bite of data insights here. Very live situation, so it always kind of gives you a surprise. But that has been the nature of the things. So that in 10 years we have become aware of this big data. And we have also, something else happened also during the past 10 years, and that was that we see the quite a major rise in interest towards design in general, particularly design thinking. So no wonder, taking these two things together, this has attracted quite a lot of new people to play around with both topics. For instance, major management consultancies such as McKinsey have taken explicit interest in both things. And I think a lot of designers have been thinking about this big data thing too, at least I have. And I've been also doing some sort of work around it, in a sense that I've been for past 6 years, starting 2015, I've been running this event called Data-Driven Design Day in Helsinki, which started out relatively small, but then we have at least 5 years have had like 200, 300 people every year attend our one-day event. This year we have to skip because of the uncertainties related to the pandemic, but we've been able to kind of put up a nice archive of video recordings of past year's talks. So anyone interested in kind of quite hands-on and practical examples of what data-drivenness in experience, service, or UX design means, you can find out a lot of stuff on YouTube or on our website at datadrivendesignday.wordpress.com. A lot of things around there, and I also have written a few professional articles about it, for instance 3 years ago in Touchpoint magazine. And my message all through these years has been quite the same. My kind of understanding of what data-driven design has meant has been that it has indicated some kind of revolution in design research. Basically, this comes out from the unprecedented data streams and availability of data as this kind of fuel for doing any types of design. And we have two different kind of sources where we get the data. First of all, we have this kind of modern infrastructure, which is constantly accumulating data about every kind of everyday transactions, about different infrastructure that we use, but also our personal devices. And particularly the fact that we've been carrying around smart phones and tablets in our pockets for about 10 years now has kind of opened up a new kind of opportunities for also actively collect data from people wherever they're going, using either these personal devices or custom hardware. I'll give you a few examples. So passive data collection, we can, for instance, analyze different kind of transaction records nowadays. And here's an example of data bit from so-called popcorn data, which basically looks into one particular cinema in Singapore. And they've been doing very nice data visualizations about how people acquire movie tickets. In this case, what are the most popular seats in this particular cinema hall? And important things to keep in mind here. The data behind this all might be quite complicated. In this case, it's actually not that, but the important thing is that the data is made quite simple with appropriate visualizations that can quickly communicate the nature of what happens in when people do these acquisitions. How does it happen? For instance, in this case, regarding how people choose their seats. Now, the question in this case or similar cases is that, okay, what good does this do for me as a designer? Well, at least one sort of like clear design pattern that we can apply with this type of insight. We can use this insight as basis for kind of smart defaults. And by smart defaults, I mean that when, for instance, when we open up a new venue and start selling tickets in this movie case, we can pretty well predict where the person is want to get their seat on if we have this kind of historical information. So it allows us to make better guesses about how to serve our customers. And of course, understanding these kind of behavioral patterns helps also to respond to novel design challenges. For instance, in the case of cinema, if we have to implement some COVID-related restrictions, we can think about that, okay, this is how people like to behave. How can we kind of do our restrictions so that they are minimally disruptive for people's regular behavior? And a few more examples about this passive data collection. As you may know, your phones like to talk to the network and different kind of background services quite a lot. So people already back 3 years ago were able to kind of create very nice illustrations of how, for instance, people do their commute, so that the network data alone can tell us how people move in the morning, when they went to the city center, or in the evening when they return. This type of data alone is not that useful, but it becomes much more useful when it's being applied to a real problem. This year, a very nice paper on nature from Hungarian researchers who used similar kind of data to create this mobility index, so that they could track the effects of different kind of COVID policies and see if they are having the desired effect or not. So these type of things make me wonder, looking back 7 years that I've been kind of actively observing what goes on. We've got new ways to get data, new type of sources. Asking the question that, are we now superior designers, as we at least seem to have, kind of new secret weapon? And my answer here is unfortunately no. I first was kind of thinking about that maybe people haven't really been picking up these tools, or just haven't really kind of found them. But then again, I've been also thinking that maybe my own intent, or my own hopes about this kind of a future utopia, if you may say so, were a little bit wrong. So I've been trying to kind of see realistically what kind of problems there have been on the way to kind of really benefit from data-driven design. And there's two kind of aspects that are, or two types of problems that are generally encountered. And these are kind of extreme examples. First one is giving too much power to data. And the second one is basically not giving a shit about the data and being dishonest toward it. And let's see a few examples of both. First one is that you can actually give too much power to this kind of big data. And the worst thing to do is to let the data make your decisions for you. Well, or it might not be the worst case, but then you have to be kind of you have to kind of acknowledge that that is what you want to do. For instance, here's a very kind of classic example. This is from UX design perspective from Google search engine, which in 2009 reported having done this experiment where they tried to find out the optimal color for paid advertising links. And how they did that was that they basically displayed 40 different shades of blue, and then kind of decided to go with the one shade of blue that was generating the most paid traffic. Basically making that normally this kind of decision of the color would have been a design decision, but in this case, this kind of mindful design was substituted by raw data. It's good to kind of keep in mind, do you actually want to do this or not? Because the other part about dishonesty is that it's been said that if you torture the data long enough, it will confess to anything. This is almost verbatim what Ronald Coase said. And what it means is that the data itself never gives you any kind of explanation or clear answer. You have to interpret the data. For instance, here's one kind of clear interpretation that we are all probably aware of, and also an action recommendation related to that, is that if your temperature exceeds 37.5 Celsius, here in European scale, it is said that you have fever and you should stay in bed. Clear enough. Okay, but let's say that you found out that you had like 38 degrees, a little bit above this kind of threshold, but there's an awesome party this evening that your friends are throwing for Halloween. You really want to go there. What do? You start kind of reassessing that maybe it's not that much, so I probably don't, it's not really fear yet, is it? So that's kind of very big temptation when you say you're trying to be data-driven or follow data, is that you actually make interpretations of the data to make decisions that are otherwise more tempting. And this is something that happens all the time in very different kind of contexts. One not so nice example from Finland, which I wanted to make, is that we, about 6 months ago, when we started COVID-19 vaccinations, it was said that we'd expect that we have reached this 80% level by October, and then we remove the restrictions. Well, this prediction didn't really go through, but there was a lot of pressure in order to kind of still get rid of the restrictions. So that's what we decided to do. A lot of restrictions were given up, and now we are once again having to see the second or the fourth or fifth wave of the pandemic around here. And I think this was kind of a very nice example of what being dishonest might look like in everyday life. So the main lesson here is that you don't take the data too literally, but you can't ignore it either, because then you are being very dishonest. And that's probably not what you try to do in the first place. So despite this kind of evident shortcomings that I've seen in design and other areas of life where people try to be data-driven, despite all this, I still think that design should be evidence-based. But you need to be able to look into many kinds of evidence, not just this big data aspect. There's one very nice illustration about this from the UK Policy Lab, and they call this a kind of meeting of big data and thick data. The thick data is probably a familiar term for people who've done any ethnography, and here it's perfectly said that the thick data can tell us why something is happening in context. And the kind of challenge for design researchers, service design, whoever, is to kind of match these two. So the big using the big data to see what is happening at scale, and then using the thick data to understand why it is happening. So also in ethnographic terms, you actually, in the age of big data, you have to do even more triangulation. You have to rely on the observations and interviews in order to complement your big data view. So through these years, I've given some thought on how to kind of reframe what I think about this data-driven, inspired, informed, aware, or data-savvy design. And I basically landed on the data-savvy design. And that's kind of ideal I wanted to share with you today. So the data-savvy designer is a person who is aware of the many possibilities to collect behavioral, attitudinal, and experience data, both passively and actively, asking and without asking. They should be able to make these requests about data when it's useful. They shouldn't be drowning in data, but they shouldn't kind of remain to ignore it. They have to be aware of different kind of risks that this big data collection and interpretation includes. There are different kind of ethical aspects, as you know, at least Europeans know about the GDPR quite a lot, and different type of biases when it comes to dealing with data, something that we already kind of discussed. You have to also think about this triangulation. Think about different data sources that can be used. Don't just stick into one data. I mean, service designers have usually like to use interviews as main data source, but nowadays we have these additional data sources. Let's try to use them. Also, another very important area is the kind of recent developments in AI, which help us to make sense of big data sets in a way that hasn't been really possible before. So it's good to get on board with that, at least understand the basics of what AI can do. And then it's all about collaboration. Most organizations nowadays have some sort of data scientists who can help you when you actually need to get your hands on the data and help, for instance, create different kind of visualizations that are much, much easier than plain numbers to understand. And then finally, promote data transparency, which means that whenever you decide to collect some data, make sure that everyone in the organization can benefit. So you don't kind of end up creating this data silos of having data, but not having any access to it. Finally, we're kind of getting close on closing time here, but I'm hoping that I'll make a couple of minutes of time to give 2 examples of design research and different kind of methods that you can use nowadays. And these are about this active data collection, and both have specific techniques, and these technologies come from Finnish companies. Let's first look at this Finnish company called Happy or Not. They provide very simple customer feedback on physical terminals. So these might be placed in any physical service point. It's kind of simple in its basic way. It only has these 4 buttons, which enable people to give feedback about their most recent experience. These 4 emoticons can be kind of matched up. If you give, for instance, negative feedback, it can ask what was the problem, and then people can choose one of the preset options. Very nice illustration of what this can actually do. It's definitely very simple. It can kind of solve any design challenge, but it can be used to pinpoint problems. For instance, XXL, sports equipment chain in Scandinavia, was able to identify a store which was having more unhappy customers than the average. Those customers were selecting as a kind of follow-up question that product availability was the problem, why they were unhappy. However, this prompted more research, and it was found out that actually the product availability in the store was not any worse than other stores. But the problem was that staff were not adequately trained to help customers discover the products. So after designing and implementing a training program, service improved and the share of happy customers doubled. So that's quite a good example of how this big data can help us to find opportunities to improve services. Then final example, and this comes about this kind of active data collection and personal devices. Another Finnish company called Kraus, their specialty is in crowdsourcing consumer insights. So the intention is that people, when they do their everyday shopping or whatever things going around in the city, they can respond to surveys, they can take images on site so that they can kind of, without any kind of external interruption, for instance, any researcher, they can give you data about their service experiences. And for instance, food product company HK Scan, also from Scandinavia, has been using this, and they have been particularly happy about the value that the shopping process, when people do their groceries, won't get interrupted by anyone kind of watching behind your back, whether you buying your greens or some other unhealthy snacks. They can kind of do the shopping and then respond to the survey on mobile phone, or take images and videos of their route in the city, in the shop. So conclusions. I think by today and by 2021, it's definitely time to get appropriately friendly with data, because the big data is here to stay. But you have to kind of a little bit be selective towards your friends in a way that pick up only the right technologies that can really help you extend your capacity in doing design research and gather insights. And of course, as mentioned before, try to be a data savvy designer. Don't be a data driven designer in a bad way. Don't take the big data and data drivenness too literally. Instead, try to kind of develop understanding of what is possible in terms of data collection, new opportunities, and then utilize them in combination with the good old qualitative insights. So you can have best of the both worlds. And maybe importantly is that don't try to do it alone. It's much better if you can get help from data scientists. The world of data can be scary and difficult, but don't let the big data fool you, or don't fool others with the data. And that's it. Then you should be ready while you kind of go do your study about these topics. You should be ready to do something important and significant with data, and don't just be fooled by it. And that's it. Thank you. Let's be in touch over LinkedIn. Sorry for extending my time a little bit, Mark, but I think we will be expecting questions in 45 minutes or 35 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Lassi, on introducing us to data-savvy service designers. It's great, and we'll definitely catch up in the Q&A. I got some questions for you there.